Through numerous guides and pieces of lore, the description of the Uchiha clan's power and reputation as the strongest clan in Konoha, the strongest country, one would wonder what force would it take to bring it down, which would obviously be Itachi and Obito, who agreed on a pact and set out to slaughter the clan without interference. Although today I would like to discuss the scenario of each Hokage showing up to do battle with the clan killers and the strongest set of Uchiha since Madara himself, Itachi and Obito. Initially, however, let's begin with a brief section introducing the power and relation between their powers along with some abilities to understand how they would combat each Hokage. And firstly, I would like to establish that although Obito is generally renowned as the strongest man within the Akatsuki, however, his powers and, it kind of do rival Itachi much closer than what you initially thought, which shouldn't come to a surprise seeing as Itachi is stated to have outstanding abilities even compared to the rest of the Uchiha clan just prior to the massacre in the third anime profile guides, with the Itachi novel also supplementing this with a note of Itachi's fireball reaching a size that only his father and Shisui could ever replicate, which is pretty telling, seeing as the aforementioned guide actually remarks how the fireball jutsu is a staple jutsu for the clan and is so pivotal that one can't be considered an Uchiha clan shinobi without it, alluding more so to the case of this being a very accurate measure of power within the clan, although Sasuke likely doesn't disagree either, as once Itachi slices Fugaku and Mikoto's throat, he manages to pile their bodies, spew their blood across the floor, and smash vases around the room to disguise the room as if a battle ensued and Itachi won, something Sasuke never once questions, but this is more so mere supplementary for Itachi's skill, where now Itachi, standing at the peak of the strongest clan in Konoha, encounters Obito in the Uchiha basement, where he watched him utilize Kamui to weave certain cameras, which was likely a recognized ability as he watched him phase and utilize it against the Daimyo escort squad, where Obito had paralyzed the Anbu and Daimyo guards through a mass genjutsu, where Itachi would break it without even using his Sharingan at the age of 7, but would be frozen in fear through trying to just process the phenomenon of Obito's ability and body when he killed Tenma. However, 4 years later, after relocating to a moonlit path surrounded by cedar trees, Itachi would cut through Obito's arrogant attitude and aura with forcefulness that shocked Obito to then make the declaration of their pact. Obito then questions if he were to refuse, and more importantly, could Itachi kill him? And which Itachi responded, "It's not a matter of if I can or not. I will kill you," forcing Obito to drop the bloodlust in his aura alongside Itachi, where the two men would then acknowledge each other as opponents. And this is likely why Obito made so many questionable remarks about Itachi and his capabilities, such as when talking to Zetsu, where he would state that Itachi's dead now, therefore Konoha is no longer off limits. Invading and bringing down Konoha would be one of Obito's life goals and of utmost importance, although so was Itachi's death, as hinted at in the third data book. But as I'm sure you know, the most notable of all Obito's statements would be his concession of if Itachi knew everything about him, he'd be dead. This statement in particular is the key to understanding how they could work together in conjunction, although it tends to be misinterpreted rather frequently when in fact the statement is Obito conceding that Itachi could kill him if he knew more, in the sense that Itachi isn't vastly below him and they are likely relative and Itachi could win depending on his knowledge of Kamui. Furthermore, this also doesn't just mean Obito is terrified of Itachi and would have gotten stomped 10 out of 10 times, as again, they are relative, with Obito simply being very cautious of how Itachi truly is with his abilities, like the Susanoo, that's called the greatest ocular ability in Data Book 3, placing above Pain Summons, Bazooka Missile Absorption, Kakashi's Kamui, and likely Itachi's other two Mangekyo abilities, the Amaterasu, the strongest physical attack, and the Tsukiyomi, the strongest genjutsu. But if you read the Itachi novels, then you would already be aware that Itachi throughout the massacre grew in power tremendously, like how Sasuke did through the Kage Summit, where he went from a base MS to a complete Susanoo, which Itachi also likely does, as well as implied by his statement towards Sasuke about the Susanoo ripening after the other two abilities took root, with the latter only coming just briefly after the massacre, where Itachi would incinerate Suguru and his bugs with the Amaterasu. However, to actually ground Itachi's power to a more empirical state, I'm just going to say he would have access to all of his MS abilities, although his proficiency with them wouldn't be as clean, with the only one really holding complete mastery over being the Tsukiyomi, which was used to kill both Izumi and Yashiro, as it has the capacity to do so. And in Yashiro's case especially, Itachi drops him into a black ocean where he would then be crucified whilst infinite Itachi stabbed him with swords until his brain was fried and he could no longer process words any longer, just further alluding to the easily harnessable power of the Tsukiyomi, and even something that could happen to one of the Hokage if they were to be caught lacking, which would likely be aided through Obito, who can actually mentally communicate with Itachi when he channels chakra whilst thinking about Obito, allowing for Obito to then materialize and aid him. Coupled with Obito being the slight superior of the two, whose abilities are nothing to underestimate as well, seeing as this Obito is likely the same or extremely relative, maybe even a little stronger than his yellow mask counterpart, which shouldn't come to a surprise, and orange mask Obito is commonly implied to be a threat even beyond the likes of the invincible Pain, through how Minato implies that yes, he watched Pain demolish and destroy the entire Leaf Village, but he wasn't the true threat, and there was probably another who was truly manipulating him behind the scenes, talking about Obito, who kind of inflates this idea a bit more when saying that Pain is his underling, which is more so supplementary material for establishing this idea, as I do believe Obito is over Pain, whereas him mocking Pain's supposed invincible reputation due to his near loss against Sage Jiraiya is probably a better talking point, although it should be a point to mention that Obito through the Massacre consistently worries about Itachi, telling him not to overuse his eyes, not to go too hard, because he highly respects his power and likely potential as well. Something pretty crazy for Itachi, but hey, I digress. Both Itachi and Obito have access to very high level fire styles such as the Phoenix Flower Jutsu that can harm the perfect Jinchuriki Killer Bee, and the Bomb Blast Dance that when amped is a superior jutsu to even Edo Madara's Majestic Destroyer Flame, which is something he can use in conjunction with his infamous Kamui, which is a defensive ability you guys are basically all practically aware of. I mean, Obito has many offensive strategies he can also pull off with it though, like demonstrated against Torne, where Obito, just appears out of his legs and then drags him into Kamui. Another offensive ability that he could utilize would be, his ability to rapidly fire out large-scale shurikens and rods that he actually kept from Madara's cave, which are visible on the wall. And the reason as to why he just uses them only later on, it's just that Obito, whilst an orange mask, didn't really ever need to utilize them. And whilst they can't really be scaled to KCM2 level due to Obito having the Rinnegan and being a little amped, I would still like to emphasize they are still probably very fast, even in comparison to like the Hokage, just because of like Obito's tier, which can not only be coupled with Obito's chakra receivers utilized against Konan due to Obito's sheer amount of 6-pass composition, chakra, but it could even allow for Itachi to either utilize his Tsukiyomi to drop one of the Hokage or as a Amaterasu to just burn them alive. I mean, even the Susanoo could come out and the spiritual ethereal weapons like the Totsuka Blade and Yadamir that are stated to seal anything and match the oncoming attacks and properties to then alter its own attributes, perfectly countering the ability, rendering Itachi as invincible, according to both Zetsu and the third data book, which also states that all attacks, even in the face of a god's power, whether from a material or astral body, ninjutsu or physical, lose their meaning, which could just be implied as like a reference to Pain if you take the god part, or just simply a note that even against like Hokage, maybe level fighters, Itachi Susanoo won't be fumbling. In the Susanoo, he also does have access to the Yasuka beads, which were capable of bombing over a third of Edo Nagato's Shibaku Tensei, despite them being inferior to the Amaterasu, which instantly dealt with the replicating dog, who was replicating through Naruto's Rasen Shuriken. So yeah, no wonder Sasuke is stated to have only surpassed Itachi in EMS, which would align with how Itachi, whilst in Edo Tensei, still having blood and having to utilize his body from the same point or some point throughout his life, can parry off KCM1 Naruto rather casually, whilst in 3 Tomoe, which shouldn't really sound foreign as Obito himself is heavily viewed as a KCM2 level threat, or at least that's what would be needed to beat Obito, according to Minato's reasoning, which does come true, fitting the kind of shonen narrative, and more importantly, how strong Itachi and Obito truly are. And with that, Basically, Itachi and Obito are a ridiculous combination of fighters and every bit of a match for the Hokage. And hey, just before that match, I just want to suggest that if you are enjoying what you're hearing, maybe this isn't your first time hearing me and you don't want it to be, then by all means hit that subscribe button, as it helps me out a ton to get more content out for you guys to enjoy. And for our first Hokage, we have the notorious god of shinobi Hashirama Senju, whose wood style is stated to be the ability of God within Yamato's 4th databook file. And even so, this isn't a real shocker for any fans, seeing as Hashirama was at one point in time a rival to Madara Uchiha in his prime, where Hashirama, upon activating his Sage mode, would display how he and Madara were truly equals in taijutsu, with Madara holding a slight edge as Hashirama would hold a slight edge in large-scale ninjutsu, hence to why the 4th databook states the two were so close to equals that the difference was paper thin. This is due to whilst Hashirama is obviously effective in taijutsu, his ninjutsu is what really shines, with his miniature replica of the Thousand-Armed Buddhist from his, cells alone in the Guru statue, took on the Shinobi Alliance and still made it even old Hiruzen a threat beyond the 5 Kage. But Hashirama had the full thing and just pummeled Kurama with the Susanoo armor and EMS Madara mounting it, showing that Hashirama definitely was deserving of this title and was actually, what was actually stopping Hashirama from doing this to the entire Uchiha compound, killing both Itachi and Obito? Oh, nothing. Okay. How about his wood golem? That's an equal to Madara's perfect Susanoo, whilst in Edo, who is stated to be the strongest Uchiha, making the case, it makes the case against Itachi here. And Obito relatively clear, with the win just having to go to Hashirama, with his Sage mode and stuff, 9-10 out of 10 times. Although for his brother, he doesn't seem to be as lucky, as while he is relative to his elder brother, he seems to be primarily only relative in base and not whilst in Sage mode, as shown demonstrably through their battle against Old Man Hiruzen whilst revived, where they would combo together. However, Hashirama's wood style, being faster than himself, does clearly outshine Tobirama, as it fully wraps around Jubito in the time frame of Tobirama, tossing up a right-hand tiger sign. But this isn't to downplay Tobirama, as this is still Hashirama after all, and Tobirama, with the aid of his speed techniques, he's actually more than capable of keeping up with EMS Sasuke and KCM 1.5 Naruto, with his body flicker intercepting Sasuke's speed of trying to erect the Susanoo hand, with Tobirama also just intercepting their combo attack to match up with a dazed Minato and their Flying Thunder God in reciprocal round robin attack respectively, which is extremely telling for Tobirama, with his, with it also just making his combat speed relative to theirs, with his sheer reaction speed likely being much greater through not only these feats, but with his feats of mentally reacting to a Rinnegan Sage Madara, who albeit does blitz and beat him up just after, but he does do it in a manner so easy enough to prompt him to joke about the differences now of how Madara is so much stronger and Tobirama alongside Hashirama are so much weaker. The heavens are now smiling upon Madara, where he laughs at Tobirama, mentioning how he used to boast the fastest speed of any shinobi, which is either through his time in the Warring States when he killed Izuna, which Madara wasn't a witness to, and with Izuna being a near rival to Madara, him concluding that Tobirama was faster and not seeing him after the fact, it could be quite likely, or it could also just be him noting of how Tobirama's era, he was the fastest of that, kind of following the death of Hashirama and the, disappearance of Madara. That's kind of when he was the fastest, which I mean, should be true, because Danzo supplements whilst on their final mission by stating that there's no greater shinobi in Konoha, and that Tobirama probably just was standing at the peak of the shinobi world through just being a formidable Hokage, a title already requiring you to stand at the peak of Konoha and the world, which is hence a speed, he could use on Obito and Itachi and potentially capitalize on his high-level water style ninjutsu, such as his Severing Wave, Heavenly Weeping, Water Dragon, or even just his Water Wall, which overpowered Hiruzen's Flame Bombs, the strongest fire style in the world. So, cross Itachi's Fireball off the list, as they aren't quite strong enough, but are likely just as hot, as the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide does mention that Itachi has the hottest fire style in the world, so it is a pretty interesting situation in terms of style within the same sense. And in the same guide, Tobirama is actually recorded of having his Water Lance, which is stated to be able to cut anything, and would probably be his best win con against either Itachi or Obito, after utilizing more of a prolonged battle scene, as they are very much rivals rivals to Itachi in terms of like stats, without Obito is at least perceived as a threat by Minato, who's KCM 2 level or a KCM 2 level fighter, and Itachi, while suppressed in Edo, does parry off KCM 1 Naruto in his 3 Tomoe Sharingan, with him also being able just to like backflip around B, blitz behind him, parry off over 10 different strikes from the 8 sword style. That's kind of meant to counter the Sharingan, but this B also just is kind of a relative to KCM 1 Naruto, making Itachi's case pretty solid, with the aforementioned lore of him being just under EMS Sasuke also kind of supplementing this, and Obito, in my opinion, obviously scales just above him, and they could use things like their swords. In Itachi's case, he could also just beat up like Sage Kabuto with Sasuke's sword, and Obito, he can actually just whip out Madara's shuriken for Obito to then throw out of Kamui for both Itachi and Obito to kind of keep Tobirama back, allowing for his greater speed to play less of a minute factor, where Itachi could then rely on his Susanoo to potentially seal Tobirama away, and this is probably his best win con for this duo, alongside a Kamui suck, which nearly worked on Minato whilst off guard, who's much faster than Tobirama, so I could see the argument, although for Tobirama, his best talking point, due to him not being able to get through the Yadamir with any of his attacks, would probably just be, him being able to teleport the Susanoo away. And while this typically does work, as the Susanoo is autonomous at will, and what I mean is, like, for example, Madara can release his Susanoo at certain attacks and maintain it against others, like the Hiruzen, for example. Itachi also just like walks in front of his Susanoo in the Sasuke fight, and in the Nagato fight, he kind of just outright steps out of it and leaves to talk to Naruto, whilst it just continues sealing Nagato at the end of their battle. And therefore, since there is 2 fighters, Itachi could just body flicker back, rendering that strategy useless, unless you would subscribe to Tobirama being a user of the Bringer of Darkness Genjutsu, which is something he does use in the anime against Hiruzen when the manga originally held it to Hashirama. However, the 4th databook states that Hashirama doesn't have the Yin release, so there are certain possibilities of Tobirama possessing it, and in that case, I could see him hard countering Obito or Itachi if he were to not pull the Susanoo teleport strategy, which is likely, and obviously, like, this could be a win strategy, for Tobirama to either beat them or stall them to then utilize his water style, like the aforementioned Severing Wave, Water Dragon, or even just one of his massive scale water style abilities, like what's hinted at within the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide that states that Tobirama used to like flood battlefields with tsunamis and whatnot. And I mean, his water wall, whilst extremely suppressed with a single hand sign, despite Kakashi, the top jutsu mastering require 2 hand signs, is able to overpower Hiruzen's Dragon Flame Bombs, the strongest fire style in the world, as we mentioned earlier. Therefore, this leaves us with basically one idea. Tobirama is slightly faster, but has only a couple ways of ever really getting around the Susanoo, and they have many ways to nullify that speed gap, and things like the Bringer of Darkness aren't even really an end-all be-all, meaning that all in all, for Itachi and Obito, I would actually say they can come away with a victory like 6, maybe 7 out of 10 times. Moving past Tobirama, we do have his successor Hiruzen, and if placed in this scenario, it's actually virtually the only possible one on this list, if we're being honest, and it's pretty bad for Hiruzen when considering how his best lore assertions are kind of derived from his standing above even the 5 Kage in his old age, with him being much stronger 10 years younger, as alluded to by Orochimaru, but this still doesn't directly give us an indication as to if he could deal with Obito or Itachi, although I would lean towards likely not, as this Itachi, especially under the interpretation we are granting him, is much stronger after the Massacre, likely a similar gap to Sasuke in the Kage Summit, which is like a fold exponential difference. He could then scale much higher than Shisui, or the form of himself, who was, without MS, able to spar with Shisui, where the end score in their sparring was 11-24 with Shisui's lead, and this very same Shisui was believed by the entire clan, mind you, to be capable of secretly kidnapping Hiruzen in his manner, likely through a brief scuffle, which should also just allude to how Itachi should at least be more confident in doing something similar, as he, along with Obito, are also far above the 5 Kage, and this leaves only one real interpretation to Hiruzen's scaling, which I brought up numerous times. Although the argument is essentially just remember back to how much Tobirama could react to Jubito's charge. He was capable of thinking and at least raising his arm, though he couldn't move his entire body when Jubito charged through him, as both he and Hashirama's trajectory stayed the exact same, implying that their centers of mass didn't really move at all. Hiruzen does virtually the same thing, although potentially even better, as he analyzes the TSOs, hypothesizing them to be similar to Oniki's particle style, where he was then able to completely evade invade his shoulder, but not his entire body. Sounds virtually identical to Tobirama, no? Now, they're actually able to both think and react with one upper body movement, but not the whole body. But in Hiruzen's case, he's actually able to react to an additional variable in speed, being the extension of the TSOs themselves, which was stagnant against Tobirama and Hashirama, potentially implying that Hiruzen just outspeeds Tobirama, which may align with how the anime has him arriving before Tobirama to the battlefield. Therefore, the only real counter attack against this argument would be that Jubito's power being in fluctuation kind of makes this argument moot for both parties. So you kind of have just to concede one. I personally wouldn't subscribe to the idea of this scene, as it puts Hiruzen really quite high, and since he has the the matching set of wrinkles from his fight with Orochimaru, he would have to be performing feats similarly than he could then, which is very well plausible if you consider his nerf against Orochimaru just being really substantial, and he never really got to show his true power, and it kind of makes this possible, which means that like Hiruzen's high ends, he would still be relative to Tobirama, if not a little slower due to lacking the FTG overall, meaning that Itachi and Obito shouldn't have too much trouble in dealing with old Hiruzen. Even if his higher, mud wall and flame bombs were to come out, and even Enma shouldn't really make a difference, as Obito's MS projectiles and whatnot are very much really just good pressure for distance and keeping people back, as like it worked against KCM2 Naruto, whilst Itachi could also just still overpower really any of Hiruzen's jutsu through the Amaterasu. And yes, Hiruzen does have the ability to kind of counter the Tsukiyomi and his ability to fight Hokage level fighters using only his sense of smell, which is pretty impressive, but he's fighting Itachi and Obito and fighting them with your eyes closed and ears closed is obviously not the best move, when Obito in character does just sneak behind people and come out of their legs to suck them into Kamui. So all in all for Hiruzen, he would probably lose to Itachi and Obito, giving them the win like 8 out of 10 times. Following up with my boy Minato Namikaze, I'm the biggest proponent of the Minato agenda. You guys know it's about to be insane amounts of glaze. I'm kidding. Just his higher interpretations because they're the most consistent. But Minato, the fourth and fastest Hokage, like the other Hokage during his time, he was considered to stand at the peak of not only Konoha, but the entire world, with his speed being unrivaled through not only his time, but the generations prior, as he would be praised among all ninja, through even the elites of the other nations, as the greatest in godlike speed, a category also housing the fourth Raikage, who is comparable to Minato whilst a Jonin, who is stated to have made shinobi of all nations tremble, according to the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide, which fits with his run-on-site order, plus the notion established by the canon birthday columns, where the Konoha Jonin are stated to rather have Minato over anyone else in their corner in the Third War, which would include the Sannin, Shisui, Fugaku, Hiruzen, you name it. This insane lore probably stemming from how the aforementioned website also notes how Minato can not only beat 50 shinobi in the blink of an eye, but can overwhelm the nationally renowned duo of A and B. A, even long after Minato's death, still believes that a finer shinobi never lived, which is consistent, as once becoming Hokage, Minato would then stand at the peak of the world through his title and speed, which is likely why he would tell Kushina that he's Hokage. He won't go down easily, and this is pretty telling, albeit consistent though, when considering Minato's feats through the Nine Tails attack, wherein he doesn't already, he doesn't already completely throttle Obito, who likely could have been stronger than the Massacre Obito due to his left arm oozing off, if you do subscribe to that, after being hit by the Rasengan, implying that Obito applied so many Zetsu cells to the point of his non-Zetsu body acting as if they were Zetsu body parts. Minato is then shown matching Obito's speed on multiple occasions, but blitzing around him and slamming him with the Rasengan. But Minato here would be even stronger, as that Minato is likely fatigued from holding off the Nine Tails through Naruto's birth, which can likely even last a near full day, which is no small task, as Minato implies that he has to be there to monitor the seal, regardless of of her being his wife, you know what I mean, which would imply that he's the only shinobi really capable of monitoring the seal, which would fit with how upon arriving at the Hokage Rock, the full Nine Tails, a replica of Naruto's avatar but with over double the chakra, fires out its ultimate Biju technique in the Biju Bomb, and with most projectiles, it's faster than Kurama's combat speed, but by a substantial degree, seeing as its projectile velocity is so fast that it was destroying the houses around it, like with what the Susanoo arrow does on the water in Sasuke's case, with this arrow being a blitz level above Sasuke himself. And considering the principles of projectiles, and more importantly how the Susanoo arrow and Biju bomb are relative in the war arc, it should be quite clear that Minato is capable of performing signs and cracking open a barrier in space and time and reacting to a blitz level speed above the complete Nine Tails, which is certainly KCM2 level through how it's stated equals to Hashirama's Wood Golem, which is shown equal to Madara Susanoo, a speed faster than his base, which is KCM2 level. Then, even so, and the full Nine Tails is also just above like a base Hashirama, which is certainly true, as we do get a flashback of their battle where Kurama bloodied up Hashirama's face and gashed his eyes shut, except against this Minato, he'd be reacting to its ultimate Biju blitz technique without any sweat marks, which he does display elsewhere in this fight, such as when noticing Kurama across the village where he was readying a Biju bomb to hit Hiruzen and his platoon with. Minato then, despite not having a mark at all, jumped all the way across the village and summons Gamabunta on his head, which would fit with just supplementary material for this insane blitz level feat on the Biju bomb, which he does do whilst implying he was acting cautiously, preparing to redirect more of Kurama's powerful attacks. Therefore, upon seeing this barrier, Shikaku, the smartest man in the village, states that it's got to be Minato, which would imply that he's the only one capable of doing this, which is consistent with not only the monitoring of the seal from earlier, but even just this placing him above Hiruzen, who alongside Orochimaru and later Jiraiya has the tip-top ceiling of their era. And even Killer B remarks that Minato's tetragram is more solid than his steel shell seal, which is probably in line with how Minato's tetragram is what actually could be stabilizing the KCM1 cloak, but I digress. Kurama himself, after seeing a 15-year-old Minato augment the tetragram seal and seeing his style of battle, concludes that he is of Hashirama's caliber, or his generation's caliber, which would just include those who tried to subdue Kurama, being Hashirama, Madara, and Mito, which would fit with how Minato's contract seal he actually utilizes on Obito is much more advanced than the one Hashirama uses on Madara in their fight in the Storm Games, in that rendition, which, would just again hold consistent with how Minato can blitz not only Hashirama, but each of the first 4 Hokage to the battlefield, which is impressive, also just due to how Tobirama directly concedes that Minato has a faster body flicker and is quick at striking too, implying a conjunction that's also faster. But moreover, this Hokage group is called the biggest of the big fish, placing them above KCM2 Naruto as a unit, making Minato the fastest of a unit that's above KCM2 Naruto. This fits with Kakashi, who actually sees KCM2 Naruto and straight up believes it's Minato, which is probably just consistent with how he goes on to battle relatively to Obito, who could battle KCM2 Naruto and catch him in woodbines and whatever. Then, much later, a Kakashi is shown combo attacking against, with Minato against Zetsu Obito, who calls their attacks persistent, with these smoke clouds behind them. And also, just to note, by this point, Minato, after teleporting all the Alliance, couldn't even teleport himself a single time, which is something he can do over 70 times if you count the kunai in the Third War. Then, he gives so much chakra that his cloak dissipates, then he gives the rest of his cloak away, and then, after forming Rasengans, one-handed signs, you name it, Minato combo attacks with a Kakashi whilst in a weakened Edo body missing an arm, and at one of the most fatigued states we ever see in the entire franchise. And don't get me started on the night guy feat, because if it isn't already clear, Minato isn't just some Tobirama or Hiruzen rival Kage, and is very close to Hashirama, as I've heavily discussed in my Minato versus Hashirama video, which I would highly recommend you check out. Now, we know that Minato can decimate Obito quick enough for his strategies to not play a factor, leaving us with Itachi, who, while I would say has a very similar chance, maybe even slightly better than Obito just due to his arsenal, through like the Tsukiyomi, that's like an EMS Sasuke level genjutsu, and a base MS Sasuke can stun and drop dead Sensei Shinobi like C. I could see Itachi's abilities just being like very fit for Minato. However, he still kind of gets hard countered and beat through the FTG, because unlike Tobirama, who uses more potent water style, Minato straight up uses FTG and Body Flicker as opening moves to just blitz the opponent off start, as shown against Obito, Kurama, and at some point against A and B of Kumo. although there could be interpretations left open depending on how you interpret their synergy and Itachi's usage of things like the Amaterasu, which is the strongest physical attack that can actually just ignite only along Itachi's line of sight. Therefore, he could potentially see Minato and light him up. However, against V2A, Sasuke's Amaterasu was dodged through body flicker, one of Minato's best moves, and if for whatever reason you would like to draw the conclusion of Itachi and Sasuke having different Amaterasus, then that's fine, as Madara was capable of tossing his armor off, and if it were to hit anywhere else other than his face, Minato could probably just toss the cloak off whilst in the FTG subspace, similar to what Minato did in response to Obito planting the bombs on baby Naruto. So I think the Amaterasu can be pressing, for Minato, but it's likely not like an easy win or comparatively to what Minato has to offer, and it would really only be effective with Obito's help, where Minato could also just blitz around with body flicker and things like this, or enter into the FTG subspace, which is actually noted in the 4th databook, and alongside the 4th databook's note on basically just the FTG guiding thunder. But more importantly, we know that there is a speed of the subspace as alluded to in the 2nd databook, which basically says it's a flight across space and time. It's a speed not even comparable to body flicker. It's more like summoning, which is consistent with how you actually understand what this subspace would have to be. It's kind of like 2 dots on a piece of paper, and wherein instead of traveling the full paper, Minato is folding the paper and traveling between the air between the 2 dots. So yeah, it is pretty crazy, and in that subspace, this is why it's not instant and why Minato says transport instead of teleport through the entire Obito fight. This is likely what Minato could do to, move around, change his angles of attack, and ready Rasengans like he does against Obito, which he can also just do to Itachi and whatnot to kind of slam them both. So this is just a really unfortunate match for Itachi and Obito, and I give Minato the win like 9 out of 10 times. Last and unfortunately least, we have Tsunade, who is truly a similar case to Hiruzen, which is why I usually refrain from kind of including her at all in these type of videos. However, I just want to assess and point out that although her best asset, her ability to restore limbs and organs, doesn't exactly matter, as Itachi can seal her, which is basically just pretty likely, considering she is generally considered inferior to Orochimaru even by Hiruzen standards, and Orochimaru was conceding that a 3 Tomoe Itachi was stronger than him in both the manga, anime, and anime profile guides, showing how Itachi is kind of a lore boss beyond the Sannin, which is just consistent with how, whilst even deathly sick and blind, he could blitz around and seal Orochimaru's Hydra, which is his higher beyond Sannin narrative form. But Itachi, who is blind, as we see, his eyes are completely whited out due to his cataract damage, preventing the protein's accumulation on the islands, still beats up this Orochimaru. So all in all, I would just agree to the idea of Itachi, coupled with Obito, probably beating up Tsunade like 9, probably 10 out of 10 times. But what did you guys think? Did you guys come to similar conclusions? And if not, feel free to cite as to why in the comments below, and it would be greatly appreciated if you could like the video and most of all subscribe. Even more so, beyond that, God bless you all. Love you guys.